Welcome to Summoner's Rift. "30 seconds until minions spawn. Minions have spawned.
With the assumptions. This is exactly what we're going to explore in this video using the fact of the way, and the reaction by the stock market was euphoric. Massive orgasm, assuming that this is peak inflation, the Fed is not going to tighten anymore, and higher we go. More juice to the rally. But does the CPI really supports what's going on in the stock market right now, or does the CPI actually suggests that the stock market is getting ahead of itself with the assumptions? This is exactly what we're going to explore in this video using the facts of the data. Without further ado, here it is. In focus tonight. The devil is always in the details. You know, all what I heard today is peak inflation. The Fed will have to actually ease from this point on. The market was right. Higher we go. The soft landing is here. The sky is clear. Yada, yada, yada. Of course, these folks are giving material for the next intro in the Maverick 4-Speed channel when the market turns down. Yeah, let's not get ahead of ourselves here, folks. The headline reads, inflation moderates in July as the CPI rises at a less than expected 8.5%. 8.5% inflation. Wow, that's really good, right? And here's the details. These are the categories of the CPI. Highlighted in green means that went up month over month. Highlighted in red, that means this category went down month over month. Now look at it month over month, because if we're going to talk about a soft landing or the Fed pivoting or the recession out of the picture, any of these assumptions, it depends whether the month over month CPI is rolling over or not, specifically in the core CPI. So let's take a look. When it comes to food month over month, prices went higher by 1.1%. So that's peak inflation, right? Matter of fact, prices at the grocery store in July had the largest price increase since 1979, with one food staple rising higher by 38% of the year. That food staple is eggs. 38% price inflation in eggs year over year. The wait is more. The inflation for food at home went higher month over month by 1.3%, and food away from home was up by 0.7%. The prices of electricity were up month over month by 1.6%. Likewise, in the core category, new cars were up by 0.6% month over month, and medical care commodities were up by 0.6% month over month, and then shelter was up by 0.5% month over month. That's a joke, of course. We all know that rents are out of control. Shelter inflation is way above half a percentage point month over month. It is certainly way above the 5.7% the CPI gives us for shelter inflation year over year. In certain cities, rent inflation is above 30%. But anyhow, the cost of medical care services, that went higher by 0.4% month over month. So all of these categories, the inflation continues to move higher month over month. No peak inflation, and certainly nothing is rolling over at all. But here are the categories that went down in price month over month, and they're mostly energy commodities, whether we're talking about energy, gasoline, fuel oil, all went down significantly month over month due to the decline in commodities. Now in the core category, used cars went down month over month by about 0.4%, apparel went down by 0.1%, and transportation services went down by 0.5% month over month. So here's the take, folks. Absent the decline in energy commodities, the reading would have been really horrific. We would have gotten 9.5% plus CPI, if not double digits. Now, is the decline in gasoline prices and energy commodities really sustainable? Because in the assumption of saying that CPI inflation is peaking, you gotta assume that energy commodities are peaking. The tailwinds pushing energy commodities higher are gone now. Well, here are the facts. The headline reads, gasoline supplies in New York Harbor are the lowest in a decade, making the region more prone to shortages. Look at this. Supplies nowhere to be found. This is the lowest amount of inventory since 2012, meaning the demand could spike up higher again, and we could see gasoline futures moving higher again. They don't have to go back to all-time highs. They just have to move a little higher. And the entire theory behind peak inflation and the Fed pivoting go out of the window completely. And all in all, when we look at the CPI inflation year over year, the reading went higher by 8.5%, month over month flat at 0. While the core CPI, all eyes, of course, are on the core CPI. You would think from the market reaction today that the core CPI actually went down. It did not. Matter of fact, year over year, core inflation went higher by 5.9%, month over month. It was actually higher by 0.3%. We will look at the sticky price CPI, for example. That actually went higher in July, and this is according to the Atlanta Fed. Likewise, shelter prices continue to skyrocket with no stop in sight at all. And when we talk about the Fed pivoting, you got to understand that they have to get inflation down to 2%. We're now at 8.5%. Even the core is above 5%. So a lot of work has to be done. They're not through with the job yet, but the market is assuming that they're done. From this point on, they're going to do maybe 50 basis points now in September, maybe 25, and then they're done. The market is actually pricing in interest rate cuts. Now, did the Fed come out today and say, okay, according to this CPI, the soft landing is here, we're done with the job, folks, please get back in the casino and go all in? We're done. We're not going to tighten anymore. We're not going to stand on your way. On the contrary, today we got Fed zombies, this time around from Chicago, Evans, who's supposed to be dovish, who's supposed to come out and say, this CPI reading proves that inflation is peaking and we're done here. But instead, Evans came out and said that the July CPI data was positive, quote unquote, but nobody can be happy with 8.5% annual inflation rate. Perhaps this is the biggest surprise. Another Fed zombie, the demon from Minneapolis, Neil Kashkari, the king of the doves. Forget about Williams. Neil Kashkari is the true dove. And now Neil all of a sudden is becoming the king of the hawks. Minneapolis Fed President Neil Kashkari in June revealed he had projected the need to take the Fed funds rate to 3.9% this year and 4.4% next year. Tells whoever that is, recent inflation and employment data have not changed this forecast. On top of that, Neil Kashkari said that the idea of rate cutting early next year is not realistic, quote unquote. And of course, this is the same guy who last year said he opposes interest rate hikes all the way till 2023. Now all of a sudden he's the king of the hawks. And Mr. Kashkari, if you're listening to this, you wonder why the public has no faith or trust at all in the Fed. You wonder why the market has absolutely no trust in the Fed, and the market is now assuming that the Fed is bluffing and they're actually going to cut rates, not increase them higher. You wonder why? Because of all of this flip-flopping. And last year, you guys been saying transitory, not thinking about increasing interest rates. Of course, the market is having the comfort that you guys are bluffing. And folks are going all in right now, throwing cash into the stock market, not knowing that the guillotine is about to fly. And here's a good take from Sven Henrik, who said, Fed speaker after Fed speaker insisted on becoming 4% effective Fed funds rate. Markets are trading like rate cuts are already in the bag. Someone is lying, either the Fed or the S&P 500. Now, let me know in the comments, who do you think is lying here, the Fed or the market? Because there is a rule that says, don't fight the Fed. Fighting the Fed will always cost you money. You're always going to end up holding the bag fighting the Fed. So why is the market fighting the Fed right now and saying, Fed, you're lying, you're bluffing, you're not going to do it? We talked about the trust issues, of course. But has the market become completely deaf to the tune of the Fed? Are we seeing euphoria and arrogance washing the stock market again? Or is the Fed indeed bluffing? Are they just lying and playing psychology? Why would they lie this way? They've already embarrassed themselves with the transitory form. If they keep coming out and saying, we're going to raise rates, even the most dovish Fed presidents come out and say, we're not done now. We're not even close to being done. It's not even realistic to assume the Fed will cut interest rates. I think Neil Kashkari is saying this because this is what he actually believes in. Think again. If it's up to Neil will cut rates right now. But these are orders. These are top to bottom orders. Come out hawkish. You're not believing this. And therefore we're seeing Williams, Evans, Kashkari, David, all of the doves coming out hawkish, telling us over and over again, they're not bluffing. They're going to increase interest rates high. So who do we believe here? We have to trust the data. We have to trust the mature reaction, not the euphoric, the formal kind of reactions. The data in the CPI says, just look at food inflation, look at shelter inflation. This is going to be a major problem. They're not even close of being done. All what we need right now is something to flare up again on the Ukraine front, and energy futures will blast higher again. And then what happens? What component of the core CPI that supports a peak theory or a pivot theory? The answer is none. You think it's going to be used cars, airplane tickets? That's not going to be it. You think rent inflation will go down anytime soon when it is a lagging indicator in the CPI? So the data that we got today from the CPI says the market is the one that is lying. The market that is the one that is creating the crowd, luring more and more cash to the sidelines to chase the rally. In other words, FOMO. And FOMO usually the last run of any rally. Folks see certain stocks doubled in price in about 3 weeks or so. They see the market lasting higher today. They see even the meme stocks moving higher. And they feel, all clear. We're done here. Let's go all in before we miss out. We're missing out on the rally. And that's how the trap is done. And you can hear it from the sentiment, not just from the votes, who become euphoric and arrogant, also from the bears. The bears start to capitulate. The bears start to say, you know what? I think the bottom is here. I don't think the market is going to go down. The market is crazy. It doesn't make sense, whatever. And they start to capitulate. That's when you know it's over. And perhaps this is the most important reaction that I got from the market today. Not from the stock market, but from the bonds market. This is a chart of the 10-year yield. And as you can see, initially, when the CPI came out, the 10-year yield went down big. And it lost about 5% of its value. But then it rebounded higher and recouped all of the losses and closed at the highs of the day. As of the bond market says, I believe the Fed. While the stock market says, I don't believe the Fed. Folks, I've been doing this for a long time. As a trader, I've been trading since I was 18 years old. But I've been doing videos on YouTube for over 2 years now. That gave me a lot of experience in the sentiment of the stock market. What we're seeing right now is no different than the rally in August of 2020. The split mania. The technicals don't matter. The fundamentals don't matter. Nothing matter. Higher we go. We're all missing out. It's FOMO. And we all know that was the top for a long, long time, specifically in individual stocks. The sentiment right now is reminiscent of the Santa rally of 2021. And everybody said, it doesn't matter what you say about the Fed tightening the policy. It doesn't matter what the technicals say. It doesn't matter what the valuations say. Higher we go. I have the FOMO. I'm afraid of missing out. We all know what happened next. In my opinion, this is the same sentiment all over again. Bottoms happen in 2 ways. The most reliable bottoms happen via a process of consolidation being boring for a long time. And slowly but surely, we see the market moving its way higher, gradually. And this was the case back in the bear markets of the early 2000s and the early 1980s. Another form of a bottom happens with a spike, an instant spike higher that marks the bottom, and the market doesn't look back from this point on. These kind of bottoms always happen by the Federal Reserve when the Fed starts easing monetary policy. Case in point 2009, case in point 2018, case in point 2020. All of these crashes, the bottom happened in a spike, a massive spike higher the moment we knew the Fed is about to ease monetary policy. This bottom that we have right now, the June bottom, is eerily similar to the second kind of bottom, not the gradual process of bottoming, but the spike higher. Yet the Fed did not pivot. The Fed is not easing the monetary policy. So to me, that appears to be a false bottom. It appears to me that this is another bear market rally. But unlike other bear market rallies, this one has 2 elements that we have not seen so far this year. Element number 1, the euphoria, which is exactly what we saw back in August of 2020. Element number 2 is the arrogance. This is exactly what we saw in New Stock Mania in early 2021, and the so-called Sand Rat in 2021. We all know how both cases ended. So my strategy right now is, instead of chasing the mania and becoming the Johnny-come-lately who's going to hold the bag, what I'm doing, I'm not saying what you should do. You can do whatever you want to do. It doesn't matter to me. It's your money. But to me, what I'm seeing right now, let the formal crowd jump in. Let this process, the so-called boom bottom elevator here, a process of collecting money. Fresh new money coming into the market. I let them do that for me. But once they're all in, as the famous scene from the Bronx Tale now use can't get out. You're locked in. I place a short, and now all of that money from the former ratty ends up being in my pocket and the pockets of others. It is a transfer of money when you think about it, from one hand to the other. From the formal crowd, the ones waiting and waiting and waiting to hunt. Their markets are a process of transferring wealth from one hand to the other. From the hand that says, this is it, this is the bottom, higher we go, to the hand that says, not so fast. We've seen this movie before. Bottoms don't happen this way. This is yet another bear market magic. That will frizzle out. And I see the VIX at 20, for example. Everybody's chasing the mania right now. Not me. Right now, I'm building put options positions across the market. We discussed certain overbought charts in yesterday's video. These charts became even more overbought today. So while the VIX is down, puts are cheap, it is an opportunity to bet against the formal rally, number one. But it is also an opportunity to hedge my portfolio. And this is how I see it, folks. It's seen from the before. It's no different until the Fed legitimately gives. Anyhow, let's move on to cover the stock market information. We'll start with the closing of the indices today, and here we go. Down, industrial average in the green by 535.10 points, or gain 1.63%. Nasdaq up by 360.88 points, or gain of 2.89%. S&P 500 also in the green by 87.77 points, or a gain of 2.13%. The sector's performances all in the green. I'm not going to shame anybody.
Your turret has been destroyed. Your turret has been destroyed. Shut down. turret has been destroyed. Triple kill.
A few weeks back, I covered a story involving a business called Zade Kicks LLC. At the time, it appeared like a Ponzi scheme. Now we have proof it was. Sneakerhead accused of running huge Air Jordan Ponzi scheme. When you all find out how much money this guy was making, how much money he was receiving, not revenue, receiving, I think you're going to quit your jobs and buy a course on how to sell sneakers. Zade Kicks promised the hottest sneakers at discount prices. Buyers say they never got their shoes and are out millions of dollars. Millions of dollars is an understatement. This is like telling the cop you were only going a couple miles over the speed limit when you were pushing 100 in a 45. Malexade rode this resale market to improbable heights. From his warehouse in Oregon, he offered sought-after kicks at below market prices even before manufacturers released them. He basically advertised that he could sell you some awesome sneakers at crazy low prices. As an example, last December, Nike was scheduled to drop the Jordan 11 Retro Cool Grays for around $225. Malexade said he could get them to you for $115. You buy some awesome sneakers and then flip them for $110 a pair in profit. Where can I sign up for this business? The catch was that the resellers would need to wait a few weeks after the official drop to receive their sneakers. Not a problem, right? Just a little patience. I think within 3 cycles, I turned $6,000 into $20,000 just cycling through and letting him buy them back from me or giving me a gift card, said Rogers, who calculates he's ordered about 1,000 pairs of sneakers from Malexade over the past 2 years. One thing I've noticed about Ponzi schemes is the operator never wants to get the word out that it's a scam, so they'll always reimburse people who throw up a stink. What made this scenario interesting is that Zade Kicks would hand out gift cards as an apology. He would offer to buy back the sneakers from the customers at a premium, offering cash and gift cards in excess of the amounts paid by his customers for the sneakers. By offering gift cards in the buyback scheme, Malexade was able to keep more of the cash profits from the fraud. That gift card wasn't to your favorite restaurant or Tinder Gold, it was to his own company. This has to be the most ingenious strategy to keeping a Ponzi alive I've ever seen. Here's your $115 back on a gift card to my shop. If you want to buy in for the Jordan 12s coming out next year, I'll sell them to you for a pretty good discounted price of $150. Just give me the $115 gift card back and $35 cash, and we'll call it even. Malexade also delayed sending sneakers, sometimes for up to a year, and left numerous orders unfulfilled without providing a refund or gift card. The best customer service is to ignore the customers, bro. Once you have their money, what's the worst thing that can happen? A negative comment on social media? Just block them. Zade Kicks received and accepted pre-order sales for over 600,000 pairs of sneakers, resulting in payments to Malexade of over $70 million. Malexade had no way of acquiring the quantity needed to fill the number of pre-orders. He was like a casino. They'll allow anyone to play the game as long as they know they're going to lose money. How in the world do you sell 600,000 pairs of sneakers? I'm not a fan of his business model, but 600,000 is a lot. He's outselling Ben Simmons, that's for sure. While he accepted payment for over 600,000 pre-orders of the Nike Air Jordan 11 Cool Gray sneakers, Malexade acquired just over 6,000. Customers were either left with unfulfilled orders, they received a refund, or they received a combination of refund and a gift card. That's just a tiny bit of difference. That would be like a hotel booking 2,000 rooms for a special night, and then everyone arriving only to find out that there were just 20 rooms available. Malexade hit the lottery. He had $70 million sitting in his account before he had to fulfill his orders. While the customers were waiting for their sneakers, what do you think he spent the money on? Malexade spent the proceeds from the pre-orders on luxury goods, including several $1 million on high-end automobiles from Bentley, Ferrari, Lamborghini, Porsche, and Mercedes, over $3 million paid to Louis Vuitton for luxury bags, purses, and other items, a large quantity of jewelry, several furs, and millions of dollars in watches ranging in value from a few $1,000s to over $600,000. The one positive that might come from his ridiculous spending is that some of these items actually hold value and can be sold off by the receiver to at least recoup some of the money. As awful as the optics are for a guy to spend all of this fraud money on luxury items, at least they maintain value and are assets in the sense that they can be sold for cash. A fraudster taking vacations, enjoying some nose candy in the bathrooms of Vegas nightclubs, and flying private jets around the world is the worst because none of that money can be recouped. In order to purchase sneakers and run operations at Zade Kicks LLC, Malexade and Mockerman applied for numerous loans at Victim Financial Institutions. Something I've learned covering all of these stories full of fraud is that we as Americans have somehow created a system where screwing over someone for less than 10K will never lead to punishment. Screwing over someone for less than 100K might lead to a lawsuit, but no one wants that. But if you screw over a bank, it's like an energy from the heavens above descends down upon you and you will never escape. Every time I see someone screw a bank, it's a guarantee that they will receive the harshest penalty. In total, defendants submitted over 15 fraudulent loan applications, all of which contained false and altered financial information. Defendants received well over $15 million in loan funds from these applications. This is the charge that is the highlight of the case, it seems. If they are proven guilty to this charge, then I think the result is going to be really heavy punishment. And if the banks can't get their $15 million back, it's going to be a long time before these two defendants will be driving exotic sports cars again. What's happening now is a receiver who has been appointed by the court has met with Malexade and his counsel to game plan how to essentially make the situation as best for the victims. Once news hit of this business being fraudulent, there were enough threats and exposure to the business that the receiver entered into an agreement with a security vendor to provide 24-hour security to ensure the safety of all employees and personnel located at the warehouse, as well as the secure inventory. The receiver also installed security cameras at all locations. I remember when some of you were sending this story to me when news first broke, and I was worried for this dude's safety. The business address was all over Twitter, the police were getting called, and it seemed like it was about to be pandemonium. The federal government has taken custody of a number of Mr. Malexade's personal customers because customers aren't exactly creditors, which sucks for the resellers because the chances of them getting anything, in my opinion, is pretty small. Here's the paragraph detailing the shoe inventory in Malik Sadeh's warehouse. 60,000 pairs of sneakers is no joke. If they all can be sold for $200 a piece, that's $12 million in cash. By all accounts, the sneakers are in great shape and most importantly, are legit. Despite his ultimate failure, customers and industry watchers still wonder how Malik Sadeh sourced so many rare sneakers. The shoes appear to have been legit, not knockoffs. Even so, a review of counterfeit sneakers was among the first things to take place as soon as Malik Sadeh dissolved his company. In all of the court documents, there's been no mention of any sneakers being counterfeit. He had $3.1 million in cash at Chase, owed $1.4 million, so the receiver accepted the difference of $1.7 million. Having $3 million in cash in a bank account would be great, but I'd rather be broke and free than know I only have 16 months to enjoy it before the feds come knocking at my door. This next paragraph presents a really interesting dilemma. The receiver's forensic accounting will also identify any net winners and net losers. They're basically going to be analyzing who made money and who lost money. In most Ponzi schemes, everyone ultimately loses money, so they're all net losers. But in a situation where some people made money, should they have to return the proceeds? Here's the legal bill for May, $43,500. That's just the start. The receiver earns a great paycheck too. The receiver charged $86,000 for their company's work for the month of May, $76,000 after expenses. My concern for the victims in this is that the money is going to dry up really quickly. This court document indicates the hourly rates for the legal team handling this case are $7.95, $8.95, and $6.50. Given how much work is needed in this case, the legal bill alone is going to be massive. Here are the hourly rates for the receivership group, from $135 an hour all the way up to $4.95 an hour. Think of how much work they will be doing, going through the entire inventory of 60,000 sneakers, selling them, going through all bank account records, all tax transcripts, all transaction statements, and then the nightmare of finding out who is owed money. This paragraph highlights the receiver's compensation, but also mentions that he will have first priority lien on all assets. I was really hoping that we could see the priority order for who gets paid first. I'm guessing it's any business loans first, followed by an equal distribution to the customers. Zadeh Kicks has an Amex card with a $1.3 million balance. This paragraph details that he owes the balance plus interest plus attorney fees. This is where the money starts disappearing. If you're one of the 3,500 customers waiting to get your money back, my fear is that all of the money that is getting recouped is going to be gone by the time the customers step up in line. Zadeh Kicks' second Amex card has a $712,000 balance. That's $2 million just in Amex account balances. Here's why money disappears. Amex has lawyers pursuing this balance. Zadeh Kicks has a receiver working with Amex to figure it out. You may have 2 to 4 people working on the same case, all getting paid $500 an hour or more. This is how the bills get so exorbitant. Zadeh Kicks had a $1 million credit line with Amex. In mid to late 2021, they requested an increase to this limit based on business expansion, increased sales volume, and the need to buy more inventory. What does Amex do? They ask for financial statements to evaluate if Zadeh Kicks was worthy of a credit increase. If you were committing fraud and wanted a larger credit line increase, what would you do? Maybe inflate the numbers a little? They claim that their 2021 revenues were $304.9 million, its net income was $17.4 million, cash on hand of $9.3 million, and total assets worth around $26.1 million. I think they were off on their numbers just a little bit, but to be fair, a Ponzi scheme has very high profit margins until you get caught. If you're the receiver and there's money left over for the customers awaiting orders that will never come, do you give back money in full to the first customers, or do you distribute the remaining funds evenly? What about people who made money from this scheme? Should they be forced to give back their profits so that the victims can recoup some of their losses? These are tough questions that will need to be answered. I'll be following this case as this was a massive Ponzi scheme in the shoe market. The shoe market! Who would have thought? Thanks for watching.
Hi, welcome to another episode of Cold Fusion, where I cover anything in science, technology, business, or history. In front of an enthusiastic audience, a 35-year-old Trevor Milton stands on stage proudly proclaiming his latest achievement. The year was 2016, and the charismatic, energetic Trevor seems like he's just about to change the world. Behind him was his tool to do just that. It was a truck running on revolutionary hydrogen technology. It could save both money and the environment. This truck, called the Nikola One, was going to disrupt the $1 trillion trucking industry and would go on to make Trevor a multi-billionaire. Bosch, General Motors, and other big names all wanted to work with Trevor and his revolutionary company that would later be worth $34 billion. The only problem was that none of this was real. The vehicle behind him was simply a shell that couldn't even drive itself, and none of the technology that he talked about even existed. But this would only be the beginning of the lies. So how was everyone fooled? And how could a man look so confident about his achievements while knowing that none of what he was saying was real?
You are watching Cold Fusion TV.
Today, it seems like the world of startups is having its fair share of charismatic swindlers. From Theranos to Wirecard, the game plan is simple. Pretend that you have a revolutionary technology or business, gain billions in investment, and finally, fake it until you can cash out with billions. In the case of Nikola Motors, you might just end up with a $34 billion company. To understand how we got here, we have to go back. Our story starts in Utah with Trevor Milton. Trevor was born in 1982 and had a rough upbringing. His mother died of cancer when he was just 14 years of age, and he would witness her coughing up blood in her latter days. Trevor and his 4 siblings had to learn how to survive with a bedridden mother and a father who worked 4 hours away. It could be said that these experiences made Trevor driven. He wanted to make something of himself. Milton and his father were close. Many years later, they would even go into business together, but that comes later in the story. After high school, Milton took a Mormon missionary trip to the favelas in Brazil. The experience got him thinking about wider problems, particularly environmental ones. He would return back to Utah in 2003 and would attend the Utah Valley State College to study sales and marketing, but he would drop out after just 1 semester. He had his eyes on bigger things. He wanted to start his own company, and so he did. His first company dealt with security alarm sales, and Trevor would sell off the company for $300,000. But in this deal, there were already signs of trouble. According to the buyer of Milton's company, he overpromised the potential of the business, resulting in a loss for the buyer. Milton also allegedly cheated his business partner out of $50,000 during the sale. In 2009, he would move into the online ads business with a website that sold used cars. Trevor would then move on to selling used cars to builders with power plants. And if you think this was a bit of a leap, it was. He had no formal training in the industry. Undeterred though, this effort would come in the form of dehybrid. The plan was to transform existing diesel engines to run on compressed natural gas. Now, this idea was solid. Natural gas has less emissions, lower maintenance costs, and is overall safer. The execution of his plan, however, was a disaster. As mentioned, Trevor had no formal engineering experience, but after some good marketing, he managed to convince the company Swift Transportation to invest $2 million. In the deal, 10 trucks would be converted as a trial run, then later, 800 trucks. But as it turned out, Trevor wasn't pulling his weight in the deal. A 2012 lawsuit revealed that only 5 trucks had been delivered. In addition, the engines had major problems and didn't do at all what they claimed. And to top it off, part of that $2 million was squandered on personal living. Milton was simultaneously bleeding through investor money and needed more. In 2012, he tried to find another investor in Utah to buy out the company, but they smelt a rat and backed out of the agreement. To run away from all of his legal problems, Trevor started a new company with his father. It was called dHybrid Systems. dHybrid Systems and dHybrids were completely different companies, and the similarities in their names was intentional. Trevor and his father now had complete ownership and would work on the same technology, but now without the legal problems. This move left the whole dHybrid partners with nothing. As outlandish as this was, the plan worked, and a new company, Worthington Industries, paid $16 million for their company. The only problem was that the company was in shambles. In private conversations, Trevor admitted that parts of the engine systems were falling off the trucks, something he stated was potentially fatal. At the end of the day, all that mattered to Trevor is that the deal was paid out for him and his father.
I freaking helped design and develop and fix all these repairs that Worthington didn't know about. These backup cab units were actually falling off of the trash trucks.
Falling off the trash truck.
Like breaking off. They were shearing the damn freaking frames and then coming off. Like nearly freaking causing deaths and stuff.
In 2014, Trevor founded what would become Nikola Motors. Meanwhile, Worthington was losing millions. The faulty engines that dHybrid had given them was causing nothing but problems. Milton was making money while the companies that he sold off were money pits. Milton would continue to convince people that he had valuable technology. On May 9, 2016, Nikola Motors announced the Nikola One, a semi-truck that would revolutionize the transport industry. It could travel 1,000 miles without stopping and only took 15 minutes of downtime to refill and do another 1,000 miles. The global trucking market is worth over $1 trillion, so a disruptive technology like this could be a game changer, if someone could make it work, that is. In a bizarre twist, allegedly, Nikola bought the design from a man in Croatia for a few $1,000s, but this didn't stop the company from suing Tesla for $2 billion, claiming that Tesla had stolen their design. Unaware of Milton's past, the world was abuzz with the news of the revolutionary truck. So how were they going to do this exactly? Well, with the same technology that had been a complete failure in the D-Hybrid companies, of course, compressed natural gas technology. The truck was to be revealed in a live event in December of 2016, a very tight deadline. Could Nikola pull it off? They must have thought that because they began to take pre-orders. They stated that the Nikola 1 was engineered, developed, and is finalizing assembly. But what did they actually have? By August of 2016, the Nikola 1 was just a frame on wheels. The body hadn't even arrived yet. There were no production facilities either, and according to a source familiar with the project, the workers were scrambling to the hardware store to pick up basic parts. Meanwhile, the Nikola Motor Company Twitter account was hyping up the event. They stressed that the truck would be fully functioning. Amidst all of this, at the beginning of August, while the truck was still a frame, the company abruptly announced that it had pivoted from compressed natural gas to hydrogen fuel cell technology. The hydrogen fuel cell announcement was even a shock to those within the company. In mid-November, as the show was drawing closer, the team was hard at work slacking the truck together. There were no electric motor cores or gears, only axles in an empty shell. The body finally did arrive in late November, roughly a week before the show. H2, the chemical formula for hydrogen, was decaled proudly on the side of the truck, even though there was no such technology inside. So I can understand that building a prototype can be less than elegant, but to call this fully functioning was at the very least a bit misleading, a fact that would later come back to haunt Nikola. But more on this later in the episode. When the big day came, Trevor seemingly couldn't hold back his emotion when talking. Perhaps it was an appeal to one's emotional side to shut down rational thinking and skepticism. Bloomberg would later state that the statements made by Trevor had alarmed some people familiar with the truck's capability. They told Bloomberg that the truck was inoperable and had missing key components to power itself. The whole truck was powered by a mains power cord that was connected under the stage. Trevor would put an emphasis on the touchscreens within the cabin, seemingly the only part of the truck that actually functioned. The whole thing was essentially a big shiny decoration.
So how long have you been working on this? Because this is a fully functioning truck right here that we're sitting in. So how long have you guys been working on this?
Years in secrecy. It's been very hard. Some of the people found out about us over the last 4 or 5 months as we announced some of the lead up to this big event. But it took years. This isn't just a pusher like a lot of vehicles that they unveil are just vehicles that don't actually function. There's a fully functioning vehicle. It's really incredibly cool.
Functional or not, Trevor had smoothly talked his way to entrepreneurial fame. The internet was ablaze with buzz, and from there, they were off to the races. Following the event, in January of 2017, the company raised capital as part of its Series A round. Nikola also signed with Bosch, as well as fuel cell and hydrogen partners. The plan may have been to leverage existing suppliers to deliver on their promises. But as time passed and the hype from the December 2016 show faded, people that were following closely began talking about the company, stating that Nikola needed to show some updates on their truck, the Nikola 1. So, in early 2018, a video of the Nikola 1 was produced to dispel the rumors that it wasn't a functioning truck. The video was called Nikola 1 in Motion, and the video seemingly worked. Even Arizona Governor Doug Ducey was impressed. He agreed to host the Nikola manufacturing headquarters in his state and even played a video during his announcement. And once again, there was now a tremendous amount of buzz and excitement. A lot of people were looking forward to the pre-production units to be released the following year, but this was never to be. It seems that Trevor was up to his old tricks again. He never really had any plans to finish developing the Nikola 1 truck. He was only interested in one thing: raising more money. After the 2016 announcement, to the shock of all of those involved in the Nikola 1 project, the truck's development was abandoned, but nobody outside the company knew this. The promotional Nikola 1 video proved to be a sham itself. According to a former employee who spoke with the Nikola chief engineer, Kevin Lynn, the video was simply the result of Nikola towing the truck to the top of the hill and letting it roll back down. Unsurprisingly, those who worked on the video had to sign NDAs. By September of 2019, Trevor Milton owned 40% of the company, and by age 37, he was now a billionaire. So, the company was going to use compressed natural gas technology and then pivoted towards hydrogen technology. They were going to use hydrogen as a kind of fuel to power an electric motor.
And why the difference? Well, hydrogen goes further than a battery electric truck does, and it's a lot lighter to operate. So ultimately, it's just a lot of juggling these different things, but we're pretty close. We just ordered the largest order ever of electrolyzers that I know of. It was an order yesterday. It was over $30 million to produce over 40,000 kilograms of hydrogen. We just made that order yesterday from Nell out of Norway. So we're already prepping our first 5 stations to be up and running. We're breaking ground. We should be breaking ground this year on these stations.
Okay.
As good as this sounds, hydrogen is expensive and requires a lot of engineering to store and transport safely. The plan for Nikola Motors was to have 700 hydrogen stations around North America and 70 in Europe within the next decade. Nikola planned to make its own hydrogen by using energy from solar and renewable sources. This all sounds amazing, but when you look into the details of who was spearheading a lot of the key technology aspects, things get a little suspect. Nikola's director of hydrogen production is none other than Trevor Milton's brother. Previously to joining Nikola, his work consisted of pouring concrete and building a barn as a subcontractor. Not exactly the experience needed. According to those familiar with the matter, Travis really didn't do much at the company. He was kept around to do a few odd jobs, hold a rope here, fetch those tools, and that kind of thing. Trevor had given Travis, along with other family members, Nikola Motors worth over $110 million. Nikola's head of infrastructure development, in charge of building out the 700-plus hydrogen station network, was previously a general manager of a golf club in Idaho. Again, not exactly the experience one would expect for the job. As pointed out by Kathy Wood, CEO of ARK Invest, hydrogen on average costs 3 times as much as electric. Trevor needed a way to fix this. In an interview, Trevor claimed that Nikola produces hydrogen for under $3 a kilogram, 81% cheaper than the rest of the world, representing a major breakthrough.
We're really an energy technology company. We sell the energy to consumers. Not consumers, but businesses that are buying the trucks. That's where the money is. Obviously, we want to reduce the cost of our truck, but we're now cheaper to drive than a diesel is per mile, and we make 5 times the revenue of our competitors. So it's awesome. That's why Nikola's really cracked the chicken and the egg. The generation that's investing now, they care more about the environmental impact of what you're doing than they do you're 6 months or 8 months from revenue. They don't care. They're like, you know what? You're changing the world. You're going to reduce emissions more than anyone else. We're invested into you.
When pressed, Trevor later acknowledged that Nikola produces no hydrogen at all. But this didn't stop BP later pledging to join Nikola to build out their hydrogen fuel network. It really is amazing when you think about it. Trevor had perfected a devious game. He would act as a spokesperson for Nikola and make up lofty claims to gain partners. Essentially, Trevor would use these claims to get investors and more partners, and then use the brand recognition of those partners to get even more investors. Ultimately, all of this didn't matter though, because the next piece of technology that Trevor was going to announce was going to change the world. In late October 2019, Trevor began teasing on Twitter that Nikola was going to change the world with an upcoming announcement that was bigger than anything that he had announced in the past. While he was tweeting up a storm, in November of 2019, Milton cashed out $70 million and bought the most expensive house in Utah, a $33 million mansion and a 2,600-acre ranch. He told the Wall Street Journal that this place was, quote, a sanctuary for my family, friends, and others to enjoy. On November 18, 2019, Nikola began negotiations to go public. The very next day, the company announced that it had solved one of the greatest challenges facing sustainable energy, a high-density battery. This new prototype battery would provide 4 times the energy density of lithium-ion and could power a Tesla Model S for over 600 miles. On Twitter, Trevor claimed that he had seen this technology perform with his own eyes and promised a major demonstration. Riding high off the announcement, Nikola Motors began to receive serious attention, and Lisa Bush was first to jump on board, placing a pre-order for 800 trucks. Trevor estimated that the value of this new technology was to be worth hundreds of billions. The thing was, Nikola had no patent engineers, chemists, or research papers published. The truth was, Nikola had acquired the battery maker ZapGo for $56 million. As it turned out, ZapGo's technology was vaporware. It was a scam. It didn't exist. And so there it was. Nikola, who had misled so many, had been misled themselves. Interestingly, ZapGo was headed by Charles Resnick, a shady character who had just scammed NASA a few months before the Nikola deal. Charles used the money from NASA to hire numerous adult workers, certainly not a business expense. Charles would plead guilty in January of 2020, but once again, all of this didn't matter to Trevor. He was still on Twitter, touting the non-existent battery technology. With nothing more than the promise of a revolutionary truck that rolled down a hill and a game-changing battery technology that was purchased from a company that was a scam, Nikola went public on June 4th, 2020. They did so through a technique called a reverse merger. The thing is, with reverse mergers, you don't have to disclose all the intricate details of your company, something that a regular IPO would require. This should have raised some red flags for investors if they knew more about the history of Nikola. But alas, investors were euphoric and Nikola shares spiked. Within 1 week of going public, the market value of Nikola surged past that of Ford, over $30 billion. To put things into perspective, Ford sold 5.5 million vehicles in 2019 with a revenue of $155 billion and had a market cap of around $28 billion. Nikola, on the other hand, sold nothing and was valued at $30 billion, making it the world's biggest truck maker without selling a single truck. And with that, overnight, Trevor became a multi-billionaire. It was settled, the markets had spoken. He was the next Elon Musk. Things would soon change for Trevor though, but not before one last cash grab. On September 8, 2020, Nikola Motors announced a $2 billion partnership with General Motors. GM was going to take an 11% stake in the company and manufacture their electric pickup truck, the Nikola Badger. The questions have to be asked, did General Motors do no research, or was something else at play here? Despite the chaos, Nikola was again accepting pre-orders for their Badger truck. To date, no one has ever seen a Nikola Badger. They only exist as a rendering as far as the public is concerned. Finally, after lying for years and roping in some of the biggest companies, 2 days after the GM deal on September 10th, the short-selling investment firm Hindenburg Research released a scathing report calling Nikola Motors an intricate fraud. The firm said it had gathered extensive evidence, including recorded phone calls, text messages, private emails, and behind-the-scenes photographs detailing dozens of false statements by Milton. They accused him of lying about Nikola's technology. This was a bombshell report, and soon the gates were blown wide open.
We believe this is only the beginning of Nikola's unraveling. Nikola's almost no intellectual property products or revenue to fall back on. We think the company's key asset was its founder's ability to raise money through hype and then the Hindenburg saying outright lies.
Trevor Milton knew that this was the end, and he publicly promised a full rebuttal to all the damaging claims. But instead, he deleted his social media accounts and disappeared.
Trevor Milton, founder of electric truck company Nikola, is voluntarily stepping down as executive chairman and giving up his board seat. This move comes after short seller Hindenburg Research accused Milton of making false statements about Nikola's technology in order to try and grow and secure partnerships with automakers. Both the Justice Department and the SEC are investigating allegations made by Hindenburg.
On the 21st of September, Trevor steps down from the chairman position, and former vice chairman of GM, Stefan Gursky, takes over. Nikola's stock plunged by 40%, and negotiations between Nikola and other partners stalled. And finally, a sexual assault allegation by Trevor's own cousin just added to the horrible mess. Many banks liquidated their Nikola stock, seemingly in disgust. The company received a myriad of subpoenas, and investigations by the Department of Justice and the Securities and Exchange Commission commenced.
His company marketed as a game changer.
We've built something that no one else thought was possible.
Cleaner vehicles powered by hydrogen and electricity.
For every doubter out there that said that there's no way this is true, how can that be possible? We've done it.
But now the billionaire founder of Nikola Motor Company, Trevor Milton, is being charged with securities fraud.
Do you have anything to say about the charges?
We have a statement. Check it out.
Milton, seen leaving a Manhattan courthouse Thursday, charged by federal prosecutors who say he lied about every aspect of his truck of the future.
Milton claimed that the Nikola One could be driven, when in fact, the closest it ever came to driving was when a group of Nikola engineers took it to the top of a hill and rolled it down so it could be filmed for a commercial.
Prosecutors claiming the truck's door even had to be taped up for the video so it wouldn't fall off.
At the end of July 2021, a federal grand jury charged Trevor Milton with 3 counts of criminal fraud. The US Attorney's Office in Manhattan accused the 39-year-old billionaire of lying to investors, making false statements about the company, and wire fraud. The SEC also filed civil securities fraud charges against him, requiring the court to permanently bar him from acting as an officer and ordered him to pay fines, as well as give back any revenue gained by his deceit. Trevor Milton, of course, denies all wrongdoing and has pleaded not guilty to the charges, but this will be a matter for the courts to decide. Since the charges, Nikola's stock has been steadily falling. Following the indictment, the company stated, quote, "We remain committed to our previously announced milestones and timelines and are focused on delivering Nikola Tre battery trucks later this year from the company's manufacturing facilities." Nikola continues to move forward under new management, but it has to be said, correcting the course of a company built on fraudulent claims by a compulsive liar is not going to be easy. The GM deal lies in limbo, and the stock price is at an all-time low, and faith in the company dwindles every day. Bosch, General Motors, and a slew of investors are left holding the bag. On a wider point, it's becoming clear that investors have collectively lost their minds. It seems as if they're only driven by lofty promises without doing a shred of research. Everyone was just so excited that they didn't want to look deeper, and herein lies the problem. Think of yourself as an inexperienced investor. You heard about this new company, and it just showed off a revolutionary truck. It was powered by new hydrogen technology, and also had amazing new battery technology. They'd partnered with major companies like Bosch and BP, and this company had raised a lot of money. You'd think you've hit a gold mine. You'd also think that you've gotten in on the next Tesla. This whole train wreck really is the old adage, fake it until you make it. But what happens if the things that you promise turn out to be much harder than anticipated? When do you pass the point of no return and just keep lying until you get caught? For Milton, he just kept lying until the very end. In a way, the story of Trevor Milton and Nikola Motors would almost be impressive if it wasn't so morally bankrupt. Maybe he did this all to provide for his family that had suffered so much during those early years. But it could have just as easily been pure greed. I guess we may never know. And with that, that is the wild and twisting story of Nikola Motors. So let me know what you think in the comment section below. So thanks for watching. My name is Dagogo, and you've been watching Cold Fusion, and I'll catch you again soon for the next episode. Cheers guys, have a good one.
Cold Fusion. It's new thinking.
Or what was failed, some of the Americans, Monsanto, that was probably a lot better because he wasn't willing to be the multilateralist that he should. should be. And there are places you don't need to be a multilateralist. American defense support for Ukraine is one. We're doing well beyond that of every other country out there because the Americans have that capability. But there are a lot of areas out there where we can't be the exceptionalists that we used to be. And having a president that understands that and leverages it would be valuable in my opinion.
I'd say two things. Number one, we haven't had a national vision since the Cold War. It's time for an update. And the last president that we had that thought we should have a conversation about what a vision of the world was no longer Bush. Second, until that vision manifests, there are really close that are real that are culturally linked to us or some combination that I think we can kind of look at the family plan to prepare for whenever we are ready. So New Zealand, Australia, Japan, Canada, the United Kingdom, France, and assuming we can line it up, I think it's not enough, but that's 7. That would be enough to be a hell of a spring for us whenever we close to our order. And then we just express it.
I want to clear up some confusion I think I have around this narrow question of what we should believe about the sanctions on Russia at this point. What larger lessons other countries might be drawing? Is it your belief that the sanctions have worked in some way? Or because last I heard, Russia's actually making more money on fossil fuels this year than last year because people can't stop buying Russian fuel and the price has gone up, and that the ruble has also not collapsed against other currencies.
The ruble is a canard because the reason the ruble is doing so well is because they can't buy anything.
Okay.
So they've lost enormous amounts of purchasing power. You know, the Soviet ruble was basically worth $1 in the day, and it was very stable and consistent, but they didn't have an open market. That's essentially what's happened to Russia right now. That's propaganda that they use to try to make themselves feel better, but the economy's in very significant trouble. They've, as a consequence of these sanctions, they've lost about 300,000 highly talented Russian workers that are probably not coming back, that are critical to...
Which I would add, the intellectual capital flight that we've seen out of Russia since the war began is far in excess of what we saw.
Oh yeah, it's devastating. It's just devastating. And you know, the Russians, in addition to the freezing of their assets, you're talking about a minimum contraction of 10% of GDP this year, probably more like 15%. It's going to get worse going forward. Keep in mind, yes, you're right that Russia has made more money on oil and gas because the prices are up, and the Indians in particular are buying a hell of a lot more than before. The Chinese are buying a little more, not so much because their economy is during COVID. The growth isn't there. But India, at the same time, is also ripping up a lot of their military purchases from Russia because they're not going to buy MiGs and helicopters if they can't get spare parts going forward, and they know they won't be able to. So these sanctions from the West on Russia will have a level of crippling long-term impact on Russia that I think will be comparable with what the West has done to Iran over the last couple of decades. That is an enormous deal, and it is not going to change Russian behavior. But that was not what the intention of the sanctions were. The intention, no one believed that Russia was going to pull out because of sanctions. That's a message to Taiwan. That's a message to Japan, to South Korea. That's a message to American allies that we're going to defend a country and there's going to be punishment. And this is what we'd do to China if they were to take a whack like that. And my God, the Japanese and the South Koreans and the Australians and New Zealanders who all showed up at the Madrid summit for NATO were saying that that really meant something. That's been a win. But the way that you're changing Russian behavior is by very significant military support to Ukraine, which is them with the Russians purchasing a lot more land than they were taking from Ukraine. And you know, you don't want to say this is going to get resolved on the battlefield. The Russians will ultimately have to expand into Ukraine. But my God, it's made a difference. That's why I give them an answer.
I agree with everything you said. I would add a little bit of context. One of the important sanctions, I would say, threw on there, that we kind of thought of as almost a throwaway, which in my opinion proved to be the most significant one yet, is the ban on any sort of technical cooperation, especially with the manufacturing, getting parts in. The Russians have most of their civilian industries running on spare parts imported from the West, and the old Soviet equipment, most notably in agriculture. But the inability now in Russia to keep really any supply line, any manufacturing run working has been absolutely devastating, and it is not the sort of thing that you recover from without 20, 25 years of heavy state investment. I don't think the Russians have that.
And do we think, given what you just said about the effect of the sanctions on Russia, do we think that the likelihood of China going after Taiwan has been reduced in the short term?
I think so. The Chinese have always looked to the Russians as the canary in the coal mine. Whenever they're considering something risky, they watch the Russians do it first, and then they adjust. not a bad strategy. And, well, they now know that the war would not be a rollover. And the Ukrainians have really only been preparing this for 8 years, but the Taiwanese have been preparing for 2 generations, and the Taiwanese have a moat. They know now that the sanctions would be crippling, and as, say what you will about the Russian economy. It's not great, but it is a massive producer and exporter of energy and foodstuffs, but the Chinese are the world's largest importer of both of those. So you're now talking about a deindustrialization risk and a famine risk. But I think it's the boycotts, not even state policy, just boycotts, that has really spooked them the most. The idea that corporations will take the lead from individuals or consumers is so alien to the CCP methodology. But that would be the end of the Chinese economic model if Western companies just decided to leave. So everything that they thought they knew 40 years ago and they've been planning for has proven to be wrong in less than a couple of months. They need a plan B. They don't have it.
I think that I just came back from Tokyo, and one of the things that I discussed with the government that most surprised me was they all asked about Taiwan. They all asked about what you say about Taiwan. Podcast about Taiwan. Everyone says about that. And even more so now that Abe assassinated. And my response is, you're thinking about this as if China is the principal and the variable. I actually think it's much more about the United States. For reasons that Peter has just said, and for my views on the sanctions and the rest, and the military relationship, I don't see the Chinese wanting to take that kind of risk on Taiwan anytime in the foreseeable future. Certainly not in the next 5 years. But I think if the United States were to have a constitutional crisis or massive violence in a whole bunch of states, not knowing who the president was for a period of time, would the Chinese see that as an opportunity to maybe shake the branches a bit and see if the status quo was really as firm as they thought? And then if the Americans don't respond, then maybe do a little more? Oh, absolutely. So I think this has much more to do with how the Chinese perceive where the Americans are going to be politically in the next 3, 5, 10 years than it does with sort of the nature of all of the enormous economic, military, strategic challenges that would be incumbent from such invasion of Taiwan.
Well, I see we're getting to the end of our time window here. Before I let you guys go, I just want a big picture view of where this looks globally, if most of what we've said thus far is in fact borne out. And I guess, what are the implications of America less and less being the world's cop and onshoring more and more over time? Numerically, I think the assumption was if America pulls back, well then someone, very likely China, would be disposed to project power in rather unpleasant ways. But absorbing Peter's thesis, that seems profoundly unlikely that they have the ability or will to do that. Does much of the world return to something more like the state of nature, given these trends, or what are you actually picturing?
Well, on the positive side, I think Ian said it best, G0. The institutions fail, the connections fail, and trust becomes an incredibly short supply. But that assumes that ultimately we all just kind of hold our breath and don't take any destabilizing moves, and by us I mean everyone. I think the more likely scenario is we see some of those destabilizing moves, and I honestly see the Ukraine war as just the first of a series of significant regional disruptions with global consequences.
Yeah, I think that if the Americans continue to pull back, and the response to the Ukraine crisis has been at least a blip in that, and I think that there could be more blips, so more crises in part are part of the solution. But I don't see the Chinese emerging as the superpower to replace the United States at all. In fact, Chinese policy, again, addressing the principal problems they see for themselves, the dual circulation policy of Xi Jinping is focusing more on Chinese consumption and Chinese supply chain precisely because they see how constrained that is likely to be and they want to forestall it. So the idea that Belt and Road is going to become exponentially greater and they just take over the world as the largest economy and everyone is aligned to them as opposed to the United States, I think that is wholly unconvincing. These are Mahabani thesis that we're heading toward the 18th century. Don't buy that. But I also would say that I just think that we aren't going to be in centuries anymore. I mean, if I wanted to take a real macro whack, we would have a conversation like this again. One thing I would say is that demographics is the one place where you can be most convinced of very strong, long-term projections. I think the rate of change of technology and what humanity needs is so much greater. The rate of change of dangerous, proliferating technologies and the upside of those technologies is so much greater than anything we've ever experienced on the planet before, that going farther out than 10 or 20 years in terms of thinking about what even the state system is You know, I mean, how
Yep.
how a Westphalian system exists. In 2060 and 2070, are we talking principally about states as the ordering principle for the world? I think there are credible scenarios where that's not true. And frankly, that's in some ways that's much more provocative and revolutionary than saying that China's going to implode. I would be saying that none of these states are actually going to be principal actors on the global stage, especially if the world goes more digital and goes more virtual. Maybe technology is having a big piece of that. I think that's a credible argument to make. But my point is that the farther out we get, the harder it is to really make these predictions.
Peter, you have any closing thoughts?
Oh no, I'm not going to follow up that. I couldn't have said that better.
Okay, well then the future will be some version of Rollerball.
I love that movie, my God.
The original one with James Caan.
70s.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it was like 75
Yeah.
or something like that, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It scared the shit out of me.
War is, rather than war, we have corporations doing roller derby. Yeah. Well, gentlemen, it's
honestly,
been...
that sounds lovely.
Yeah. Gentlemen, it's been a fantastic conversation. Thank you for educating me, and I hope we do it again because there'll be more to talk about, no doubt.
A lot of fun.
This is great. Thank you.
Welcome to the Making Sense Podcast. This is Sam Harris. Okay, well, it's been a big week for news. There's many things happening in the world. Of course, there were the January 6th hearings, which are not at all the partisan witch hunt that Republicans are claiming. Most of the witnesses have been Republicans. That should be a pretty obvious point. And most have been avid Trump supporters. Most of them did this lunatic's bidding up until the last moment, when they were staring into the abyss. Some of them, like Cassidy Hutchinson, whose testimony was the most damaging to Trump, have everything to lose from coming forward. No doubt she and her family are now besieged by death threats and very real security concerns. She was an extremely compelling witness. She was obviously a Republican partisan down to her toes, and yet she recognized that what happened in the run-up to January 6th, all the cultic hysteria whipped up by the big lie, and then what happened on the day itself, was an abomination. Perhaps I should emphasize for the 100th time that political partisanship has nothing to do with this. Liz Cheney is one of the people running this issue. She is a conservative Republican, pro-life, and against gay marriage. She is, by my life, a religious extremist. And I'm sure I disagree with 95% of her politics. But she is a straight-up American hero in my book. On a bad day, she's doing more to support and defend the Constitution of the United States than the rest of the Republican Party has done in years. She is standing between us and the utter dismantling and desecration of our democracy. This is not a partisan point. For instance, I'll concede that almost anything bad that is said about the Democrats now is probably true. Biden appears unfit for office. Whether he's actually senile, I don't know. But he simply can't communicate the way the president needs to. I mean, you watch these speeches and interviews and press conferences, insofar as they even take place. Every sentence is a death-defying feat. It's like watching your mom do parkour. You're just waiting for the worst thing that has ever happened every fucking second. And he is totally unfit to run again in 2024. And Kamala Harris is probably worse, but she might be fine neurologically. She still manages to speak in word salad, in an apparent effort to talk down to people. Have you seen these snippets of her circulating? Some of the things she says are completely mystifying. It's like someone trained an AI on woke Twitter and had it talk to itself for the equivalent of 1,000 years, and it went properly insane. And as a political candidate, she manages to convey a disingenuousness that makes Hillary Clinton seem like Will Rogers. This administration is doomed, right, and has been doomed almost since the very beginning. But Biden and Harris saved our democracy by beating Trump. And as odious and as incompetent as the Democrats have become, there is simply no comparison between them and what the Republicans have become under Trump. Trump and Trumpism is not just a symptom of a deeper problem. They are that too, but they are also a cancer that has been actively destroying our politics. You have to cut out the cancer. I mean, Trump has always been and remains a litmus test. The real Trump derangement syndrome is to not see how abnormal he is as a person, and to not see or to not care how abnormal it is that such a person could have ever become president of the United States. But that's the real Trump derangement syndrome. To say or to think things like, well, all politicians lie, right? What's the difference with Trump? There's no both sides to this political moment. Making Trump president was like making Alex Jones the lead anchor on the nightly news. Whatever you want to say about the media, whatever you want to say about CNN, for instance, about the errors of journalism they make over there, and about how woke everyone is, it would be orders of magnitude worse, and the degradation of our journalistic standards would be complete if they swapped in Alex Jones for Anderson Cooper. That would be a totally different world, journalistically speaking. And that's where we are with the Republican Party. Apart from a few brave people like Bruce Cheney who are trying to save it from itself. Anyway, if you haven't been following the hearings for whatever reason, you're missing something. The window they have opened onto the last days of the Trump administration is beyond unflattering. And the prospect that we may one day see the orange man in an orange jumpsuit seems to have grown a little. It's hard to imagine him not being prosecuted now, after what we've learned. That is, of course, if he doesn't become president again in the meantime, which remains a real possibility. Now, of course, the biggest development in recent weeks was the overturning of Roe v. Wade by the Supreme Court. Some people have asked for my thoughts on that and about the ethics of abortion generally. Perhaps I'll do a podcast on that at some point. But briefly, I guess the first thing to say about Roe is that the writing was always on the wall for Roe. Right? It has always seemed like a dubious judicial decision, and just the wrong way to enshrine abortion rights at the federal level. And the fact that we've been relying on it for 50 years has been a failure of governance. Right? The Democrats knew how precarious Roe was.
Water scarce city. Despite being surrounded on all sides by waterways and located in one of the rainier regions of America, the landscape upon which it was built lacks a significant supply of fresh water. To Manhattan's east, there's the East River, but its name is a misnomer. It's not a river. It's a tidal estuary, connecting one portion of ocean to another, letting them push and pull undrinkable, unusable saltwater through. The Hudson River, to the west, does use the term correctly. It is a legitimate freshwater river, but by the time it arrives on the shores of Manhattan, it doubles as another ocean estuary. As the tide rise, seawater pushes in against the flow. The river only becomes usable freshwater somewhere between the Tappan Zee Bridge and Poughkeepsie, depending on season and conditions. That's to say, the waterways that surround New York City, that make Manhattan and Staten and Long the islands they are useless to quench the thirst of those living atop them. It's a perpetual irony. This location, at the head of one of America's greatest navigable rivers, attracted more individuals and industry than any other in the country. But that very location is the origin of its issues in supplying its populace with water. Strip away the skyscrapers of today, the brownstones of yesterday, and the streets of centuries ago, and you have a lumpy, forested island with one major freshwater source. Stretching across what are now 4 blocks in Chinatown and extending 60 feet or 18 meters below the ground, it was called Collect Pond. Some of the area's earliest indigenous villages laid on its shores, and so did some of the earliest European fortifications, but centuries on, after the Dutch left and the English moved in, tanneries, breweries, and other water-hungry businesses took over these same lakefront lots. For the burgeoning city, this proved problematic, as heavy use of the area's sole major water source made that same source unusable. The water was poisoned by the city around it, and so were the people. Wells were dug, but the situation was the same. The groundwater table beneath the grimy, gray streets was hardly fit for human consumption. And beyond that, Manhattan was small, and so was its watershed. It was hardly sufficient to supply the growing population, let alone the population of today. New York City could no longer be self-sufficient. It needed the help of the mainland. If one were to hop in a car near the old Collect Pond today, go north on FDR Drive, cross the George Washington Bridge into New Jersey, bank north on Palisades Interstate Parkway, north again on Interstate 87, and exit at Kingston, New York, they will have driven for 2 to 3 hours, covered 100 miles or 160 kilometers, and though far beyond city limits, they'd find themselves within the jurisdiction of a New York City police department, just probably not the one you've heard of. This is the Ashokan Reservoir, one of the most critical and therefore most closely monitored pieces of New York City infrastructure. Here, in an area that receives some 40 inches of rainfall a year, is where the city has stashed an impressive stockpile of water in a series of rather unimpressive-looking reservoirs. These 6 reservoirs have a staggering 460 billion gallon or 2 trillion liter storage capacity and catch the drainage of some 1,600 square miles or 4,000 square kilometers of Catskill Mountain landscape. And yet, while the size is extraordinary and the adopted watershed's nothing short of essential to the city, it just doesn't look like much. In fact, what's so spectacular about these reservoirs is how thoroughly mundane they are. There are no massive treatment facilities, no towering protective walls, nor any Hoover Dam-like superstructures. Just a few large reservoirs surrounded mostly by forest, a few farms, and some quiet upstate hamlets. This is by design. In fact, this simplicity is the system's strength, and maintaining such simplicity actually requires quite a lot of coordination. Of the billions of gallons that pass through this watershed, not one goes through a filter, making the Delaware Catskill system the largest unfiltered water supply in the US. This distinction is a point of pride, but also the source of plenty of headaches. In order to meet stringent national standards set by the EPA and the Clean Water Act, New York City must monitor, protect, and prove over and over again the quality of this unfiltered water. Fortunately, the means for such heavy oversight were provided by the same 1905 state legislation that greenlit the Catskill Delaware project in the first place. Along with the reservoirs, the New York legislature also established the New York City Department of Environmental Protection to oversee city water and gave the city the power to regulate land use in the watershed so long as they provided local communities access to their system. Effectively, since 1905, New York City has had authority over what Catskill communities did with their land and put in the water. Hence the New York City police cars 2 hours away from the city. Today, to both ensure they meet quality standards and protect a logical terrorist target, the DEP staffs a 200-officer police department that patrols the watershed by car, boat, and even helicopter while maintaining a detective bureau and emergency service units. But it takes more than a few cops patrolling reservoir borders to ensure that the unfiltered water is safe enough for millions. For this, the DEP employs nearly 1,000 scientists, engineers, and additional staff in the watershed to run daily tests in the reservoirs and their tributaries and work with nearby farmers and communities to limit dangerous pollutants making it into the runoff. Every day, robotic buoys spread across the reservoirs take measurements on the water's turbidity, while labs run test after test to measure the presence of waterborne pathogens. While a tour of New York City's adopted watershed makes it seem a quaint pastoral landscape, these waters and the woods around them are closely monitored, heavily guarded, and teeming with DEP employees. But that pristine, clean water is of little use sitting 2 hours north in the Catskills. It has to actually get to the city. Now, transporting 1 gallon of water 120 miles or 200 kilometers is no challenge. What is transporting the sheer quantity that 9 million people demand. Every minute, the city consumes roughly an Olympic-sized swimming pool's worth of water, 680,000 gallons or 2.5 million liters. If one were to transport that quantity by semi-truck, it would take 71 of them, just for a minute of consumption. Of course, that's not the solution. What are 2 of the longest and largest aqueducts anywhere on Earth. The first is called the Catskill Aqueduct, a winding miscellany of dams, tunnels, and siphons capable of moving some 500 million gallons of water a day, 92 miles or 148 kilometers to the south. At the time of its opening, this aqueduct was heralded as a feat of engineering bested only by marvels like the Panama and Suez Canals. It was something that superpowers would boast of, built by a single city. But New York didn't stop there. 2 decades on, it became clear that the ever-expanding metropolis needed yet more supply. So, it built one single, continuous, 85-mile, 137-kilometer tunnel. This was an inconceivable step forward. Before it, the world's longest tunnel stretched just 29 miles or 47 kilometers. This was over 3 times longer, and still today, the better part of a century on, maintains the title of the world's longest. It enters the Earth here, beneath the dam that holds back the waters of the Rondout Reservoir, and immediately plunges some 1,000 feet or 300 meters down, puzzlingly beneath the elevation of New York City. You see, while most think of aqueducts as a network of canals, bridges, and tunnels slanting slightly downward, modern aqueducts rarely take this form. There are myriad insurmountable obstacles sitting between the Catskills and New York City, so building a consistently downhill path with only a couple hundred feet of elevation differential between the reservoirs and the city would be an unbelievably complex endeavor at this scale. Conveniently, however, they didn't have to. The Delaware Aqueduct essentially operates like one giant inverted siphon. Now, the physics behind how siphons work is not fully understood, there are competing theories, but what matters is that liquid sent through a tube will always return to its source elevation regardless of the path of that tube. That's to say, water will flow upward against the force of gravity as long as the output of the tube sits below the input. Therefore, it's rather useful that the Delaware Aqueduct's origin, the Rondout Reservoir, sits some 545 feet or 166 meters higher than its destination, the Hillview Reservoir. The tunnel constantly changes elevation, avoiding obstacles, reaching its deepest point as it passes through the bedrock below the Hudson River.
A summoner has reconnected. Minions have spawned. Rampage. Your turret has been destroyed. destroyed a turret. Your team. An ally has been slain. The Summoner's Rift. Seconds until minions spawn. Minions have spawned. First blood. An ally has been slain. Enemy double kill. Shut down. An enemy has been slain. Your team has Welcome to Summoner's Rift. Seconds until minions spawn. Minions have spawned. First blood. Has been slain. ally has been slain. An ally has been slain. Enemy killing spree. slain. Summoner's Rift. Seconds until minions spawn. Minions have spawned. been slain. Shut down. An ally has been slain. Your team has destroyed a turret. has been slain. slain. A summoner legendary.